Hello.
Cool. Alrighty. Looks like we have most people here. Thanks everyone so much for coming. My name is Amelia. I'm one of the LCs for the Community of Practice along with Desiree. And today we're going to be talking about restorative practices and community agreements and just the perennial issues of running a space and how do you work with teens to build relationships and show them about community care and about the importance of also respecting where they're at developmentally. Do you have anything else to add for intro?
Like joining us today. It's an exciting topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's something we all deal with, so it's a good one to collaborate from saying that, suggesting it. So we want to do an icebreaker now. I think we have, so we could do your name or names. I know that there's some people have already introduced themselves, so if you have already, you can just type, I think we had thought, what was a program you did this summer that you
You want to start?
or do we want to just go around and say, maybe we should just say it, like, verbally. Okay, yeah. All right, so I'll start. I'm Amelia here at Pima County Library. A program, we did podcast camp this summer. That was a program that I led, so I was really hoping they were going to do like personal stories, but then they mostly wrote fictional stories, which was a difference. But I was actually really happy with the stories that they came up with, or not actually, but they came up with really great, interesting fictional stories. So it was kind of fun to see the finished product and see.
Summer was making electric microphones out of soda cans.
I'm Megan Anderson. I'm the Youth Center's manager here in the Mix.
I'm Ruben Balderas. I'm one of the librarians here at the Mix as well.
Earlier, this is our second Hangout. Favorite programs was a filmmaking workshop. We had teens do a film
Around library.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Justine. I am the youth supervisor and participated by the team for teams. So that was my favorite one because they actually got to create what they wanted to do and execute it.
Cool. So they came up with the Fun in the Sun idea and stuff?
Yeah. And they set up about 4 or 5 different science experiments that they were interested in. And they told me what their overall scope was of their program and what they wanted to accomplish. They had a budget. They looked at their program supplies. The only thing I did was
camps that I really liked. This one was for 5th through, where we did a mixture of different STEM activities that all came together. So they built a bridge out of straws and that sort of thing one day, and then they coded lights for the bridge, also sensors, and then either faster or slow down or stop. So that was probably one of my favorite ones we did this summer.
I see. Well, Desiree, you haven't gone yet. Do you want to go?
And this is
Sarah Ryan, Teen Services Specialist at Oklahoma County Library.
and Brian, Martin, and Judith are going to talk about the highlights of our program.
Hooray! So I am Judith Guzman Montes. I am a bilingual makerspace library assistant. I work at the Rockwood Library Makerspace here in Multnomah County. The branch is called Rockwood, and I'll let these two lovely folks introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Martin.
From teens who we did or skateboarding camp, and then they said, hey, we want to do something. We want to paint a mural. Can we go do some graffiti? And we said, yeah, let's figure out how we can do it. So we had to talk to a bunch of people, and there were some issues regarding like facilities. Could we do it in our building? That might take a while. So instead we partnered with a local mural artist, Alex Chu, and they sourced a place for our teens to paint. It was a shipping container.
Public library system. I'm usually stating. What we did was actually the animation camp that I had created and run in our space, where our students learned After Effects in and out to kind of learn how to create a walk cycle for various characters.
Artists from our city, Gems and Chew, and the teens made They got stickers printed. They printed their artwork. They developed a brand.
We're geeky. I'm the tween. We're a tween person. We're definitely wanting to go in that direction. Rachel.
Partnering with our community partners, the International Rescue Committee, which is a refugee resettlement agency, working with their youth leadership program called Youth Justice to share out their learning through blog posts and Instagram posts, etc. So.
Oh, very nice. Some real world applications.
And 3D printer and Final Cutter and Photoshop and everything else, made board games from scratch. And they ended up with 5 board games, boxes and all, that are like ready to go to market. So that was a pretty successful one.
Wow, that's really cool. Oh, I'm seeing, okay, librarian JS. Let me read them. You're going in and out for me. Maybe you could type what you're gonna say. Okay, anyone else who hasn't gone who wants to go? I'm gonna leave Daniel for last since I'm just really amazed at how far flung geographically we are, like where everyone is. But they did a marine biology makerspace camp. That's awesome. Okay, and if anyone has any comments or anything, feel free. You already have been. So let's just move right.
Sure. Library associate. Contingency here. Not happy with this like status quo. We wanted to, realizing that like the library is an extremely important place for people to get access to resources. There's a lot of things that we're probably the only way, or one of very few ways that we want these kids to be in the library. We don't want to be like kicking them out all the time. We especially don't want to be kicking out like a disproportionately high number of kids of color. Like this doesn't really help anybody. These kids are acting out most of the time, are going to be disproportionately punished. And you get into this real like vicious cycle kind of territory where, you know, school to prison pipeline. I'm sure you guys are familiar with like a lot of these concepts, but punishing them doesn't address like these stressors in their lives at all, right? So, I mean, that's like a lot of the theory kind of behind it. We're sort of trying to bring like ways to really bring what we're doing day to day, impetus behind that. And so, you know, and trying to help them understand that having problems with staying in the library. So just kind of listening to the kids or giving them an opportunity to speak for themselves, where otherwise you would just be kind of like kicking them out of the library. So you might apply like some active listening to somebody to say like, hey, like what's going on here? What's the problem? Why are you having, you know, trouble like, you know, running in the library or whatever? You know, not to get into like too specific examples, but depending on the severity of the situation, you might move it into a more higher level intervention. So you got active listening, open-ended questions. Library just kind of, I don't know if that's good.
Yeah, that sounds like a good rundown of the way that we do it. One thing that I was thinking about is the fact that we don't have the boards at all of our branches. So to me, that means you can still use restorative practices even if you don't have an official board set up. Daniel, do you know how many branches have the boards?
Right, yeah, so there is actually one branch so far that has like the fully established like library procedures and like a board that meets regularly. And we are in the process right now of, there's like 2 other branches. Our system has like 26, 27 branches. So there's 2 more branches that are in the process of being trained and getting like a board together. And then, you know, there's some like flexibility there, like not, if you have a smaller branch, you might not necessarily need like your own board. You might share one with another branch or, you know, whatever. There's like all kinds of different configurations you could come up with, but.
Cool. Yeah. So I see a question already, so let's open it up to questions before we move on to our group discussion. So do you want to weigh in on this, Daniel? We have youth who are really reluctant about speaking up in groups, if there's any possibility of loss of status with the other group.
Yeah, totally understandable.
Mm-hmm. And with these questions, if anyone wants to type in things that they have thought too, but yeah, Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, because kids are obviously very concerned about how they appear to each other. You know, their peer groups are like really like the most important thing in their lives at a certain age. So in this case, I mean, you know, you'd have like different options here. Like if you wanted to do kind of like a less intensive, you know, like just a more active listening thing. A lot of times if you just, you know, if you find maybe a day where they're just not with their friends, sometimes they're by themselves. If they're always with their friends, like that's a problem. You could try just taking them aside, you know, to just a different part of the library and just having a conversation with them, say like, hey, you know, could we have just like, I want to talk about this. Do we could we just have a conversation over here? But if you're having like a more formal thing, I mean, you could have a mediation circle just with like that youth, and like if you're afraid they're going to be distracted or afraid to like share their real opinions, then, you know, you could, I would just try to find other ways to like kind of isolate them from their peer group that they would be like trying to perform in front of. Yeah, or if you're in like, if you did get up to like a formal board type situation, you know, you would probably only be like addressing them, like they might not like have their friends there necessarily. So, and that's a good, yeah, Amelia has a good comment there. Yeah, just, yeah, trying to find, yeah, just like a private place to talk, be my advice. Right, private development, that's a great question, yeah. So that originally they were thinking that they would have to have parental involvement of some kind. That's not always like feasible or like doable. So it's not like necessary if they're going to a board. And yeah, I'm not sure like what the actual like legal like logistics of that are. But my understanding is that, yeah, they can attend like a board session like on their own. But, you know, depending on the kid, parental involvement can be like a super useful tool. So especially if the parents are like more willing to kind of be involved with the kids' lives, and you have like a relationship with the parents, then definitely, you know, use that as like leverage whenever possible. And having like a formal board meeting with the parents there can be like really effective too. Let's see, your hand's open and this questions are active. Right, yeah, and sure, like if they're just not, like they just might not be into it, and you'll just have to kind of play that depending on like the severity of, like if you're addressing like a serious issue and you're trying to address that through like, you know, like an active listening kind of thing, or like a circle, and they're just like not engaging or not into it, I would just try to continue. Like a really important thing is to like not give up on the kids, you know, to make them, you want them to understand that you're going to be there to try and help them like as much as possible, right? Because they're just not at the same like level of maturity or brain development. So they might make a decision like, hey, like this is stupid, like I don't want to do this one day. And they might think about it more, and the next day maybe like, okay, I want to do a LARP session. So you kind of just have to leave that possibility open to them coming back around, you know.
And could I add, this reminds me of something that this team has done, which is adjust the code of conduct. So we have like, so say someone, it escalated and they were yelling or there was some kind of issue, like an adult might be suspended for a much longer time than a young person. So we've adjusted it to be more lenient in that situation. So maybe it would be like, you have to leave for the day, but you can come back tomorrow, which would be restorative in the sense that maybe an adult would have to leave for a month or longer. So like you said, Daniel, that leaves the opportunity for learning in the future and letting them know that maybe you're not ready to have this conversation today, but you're definitely welcome back tomorrow. So I'll send out that updated code of conduct, because we have changed it so that the code of conduct applies differently to young people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and it's like you can still like, you know, it's not like you can't suspend kids. Like if they're totally just not, if it's not a good day for them to be in the library, it's not a good day for them to be in the library, and you can have them come back tomorrow. You know, but always kind of leave that option open as much as possible, I would say. So let's see, I'm gonna try to catch up on a few of these. What does it look like when you reintegrate youth back into the community? Like in my observation, it's pretty, like they usually just kind of go back to normal, like they're just hanging out with their friends again. And hopefully like they've learned a little bit, right? And if they have to keep going to LARPy sessions, that has been like the experience with, you know, some youth will just go to a session and they'll be fine. Or some of them will take additional sessions, but it still has an effect. And it's still like they're still going to be offending less than they were previously, like in every case. So you just keep trying, because the kids will pick up on that. Like if they know like you don't care, then they're like going to care that much less. But if they know like you care and that you really have their best interests in mind, like you're looking out for them, then that is going to make it a lot easier for them to like try again, essentially. Staff buy-in, yeah, that is, let's see, take away solutions. You regularly have technology. Right, and so all this stuff, like, it kind of would be like a branch by branch thing. So every library branch is a little different in terms of how many youth they have even, or like how like rowdy they might get. But staff buy-in that can be challenging, but outcomes, like just showing what the outcomes are, explaining what the outcomes are, or like just modeling the behavior and having the outcomes be visible to them, like that's super important. Because like we don't just do this because it like makes you feel good or like worked. So that's like the biggest reason to do it, honestly. So just especially if you're like in a system that is resistant to it, or is like a more punitive approach, trying to just bring it up even, or talk about it, or just modeling like more restorative approaches is probably the best way to sort of get your colleagues like on board or to take it seriously. I apologize, I'm kind of probably missing some of these.
Let me jump in here too, and this just reminds me of more information that I'll send out, but in terms of, have you seen improved behavior at Columbus when where the board is? Like, I think that there was about a 50% reduction in suspensions, or
I think it was 75 actually.
75, yeah. Wow, yeah, so it's a significant reduction in our suspensions and in behavior issues. So that will be, I think, that data also could help with that conversation, and we can give that to you guys so you can show that that it's working.
Absolutely, yeah, and all like there's like an hour-long like presentation, I think that's like on the PLA webpage, which I believe Amelia linked to in the agenda. But yeah, that there's like a lot more in-depth information in that for sure. But yeah, so, and on the same note, like what if you don't have the power to adjust it, right? That's sort of like trying to figure out how to leverage like your own power within like your organizational structure to be more restorative, essentially. So trying to find out like how to implement this stuff like on whatever scale like is available to you is important, and just being creative with that. And just communicating. When you communicate to like superiors, try to focus on like outcomes, I would say, and just how it is like, how it would be like a more effective way to deal with incidents at your library. So where do we ever serve? Do we have a restorative justice coordinator? Like not, I don't think we have like that specific job title. We just have like people that are otherwise like, like librarians or LAs that are on the LARPy team. And then we contract out with, there's like a nonprofit here in Tucson called like Our Family Services, at the Center for Community Dialogue, actually. And so we do our trainings like in partnership with them. So finding like community partners is also like super, super helpful. Oh, chill pill activity. That's a good idea. Yeah. Having like, just kind of like stuff ready to go to sort of de-escalate, defuse situations. That's a great idea.
So let's see. One new message. So Caitlin's gonna type up those chill pill activities. So we have this time scheduled for breakout sessions after this. We still have like 20 more minutes. Does everyone feel okay doing about a 10-minute breakout session and then coming back? Or we could do one big session. So maybe type in the chat if you'd like to do a big session or go into a breakout session. Big session. Okay, seems like so far we had the votes. Okay, great. Big. Okay, the votes are in. So I think that probably we should just keep talking about restorative practices and use those discussion questions that were posed about restorative practices. So I think Christina's suggestion of the chill pill activities would be a great way to get the ball rolling of like, what are strategies that you've used to implement restorative practices at your branch? Because I do believe the great thing about it is even if you aren't able to institute at a system-wide level, you can always institute it just for you and how you interact. So either if it's just with you and in your makerspace, or if it's big, I'll type the question. Let's see. Let's start with what successes have you had with restorative justice? And let's have some people, if you want to talk, just go ahead.
I have a question, Martin. I noticed you had a chat question. Did that get addressed?
I did have a question regarding if any of you guys have used volunteer opportunities as a practice for restorative justice, and if so, how, like what staff was in charge of that or took the lead on it?
That's a good question. I have not, but you mean like in the sense of like finding a volunteer opportunity for like a youth that like needs like something to do with their time kind of thing?
Yeah, well, or something that was had something to do with their behavior on trying to make both sides whole, whether that be because sometimes the harm is also with staff per se too, and it's not just to patrons. And so having them also, I think that also allows them to have more ownership of their space. And so as a library, I think that it's a great opportunity, since we do have great volunteer opportunities, to take advantage of that, of allowing them to maybe shelve or something, that, or have that be an alternative to an exclusion or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and somebody made the comment that they were moving away from it because they didn't want the volunteering to be punitive. But yeah, I think if the kid is like, if it's, you know, if they're fine with it, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, totally, like conscript them, because that will, you know, a lot of times they just like need something to do, you know. So I think that's a great solution. I mean, that's like a win-win kind of thing. So definitely finding like opportunities like that is, yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity to also build relationships, because you would have a staff person work alongside them, and you would really be able to build that community and that relationship with that patron, and that hopefully will mitigate their behavior in the future.
Oh yeah, yeah, I would absolutely encourage that. And you know, a lot of times, like, like problem kids like turn out to be great volunteers and great like employees. They turn into pages and library directors, who knows.
Maybe sorry, could I just maybe a solution could be like, if it, like I saw, it was like, if I sense tensions rising, or like kind of try to get in before like there's a problem. So it's like a way of building a relationship, offering projects and volunteer opportunities, kind of as a way to get in before there's a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would totally encourage anything that just helps you just get to know like the kids better, or that helps them get to know you better. Yeah.
How do you manage your community agreements? So could you elaborate that on a little bit?
So yeah, we're looking at the idea of creating community agreements. In fact, it was Nate who brought this topic up, which is something that we're really thinking about. I noticed that you at Multnomah, you have it where you have a youth actually sign the agreement, and it's between you and the youth and the space. And one of the things that I'm thinking of, just in the same way that we have an opt-in system, for example, for publicity, that we have a sign that flashes that says you opt in to knowing that your picture might be taken and used for publicity purposes. Anybody done anything like this where you have your community agreements posted in the space, where you would point to them to, if you have issues and challenges, where you say, hey, this is, just remember, you're not really following the values and agreements that we have for the space. Just want to get your take on it, Rockwood, since you guys have done it for a while, and just any other space who is using community agreements. How do you use them as a way to enforce guidelines and behavior expectations?
For teen council or teen librarian, they put together with the teen council, they put together some community agreements, and we do have them in the space. But I don't know that we use these as like, hey, remember, by being here, you've agreed to these community agreements. They're here, you can see them, but I don't know that I myself personally would say, hey, these are the ones that we are following. I think what I end up doing is I defer to the library rules, which are much more legalese. So that's something that I'm definitely noticing, like, oh yeah, something for me to work on is, but I don't want to just say, hey, there's the community agreements that other teens put together and you probably didn't have any input about. So that feels a little icky. I see them there, they're great, but I don't know that we're implementing them.
Well, and the thing that we do have them sign is the safety agreement,
which is
much more around like the equipment and stuff. And but actually, this is making me think that there's no reason we couldn't add the community agreements to the safety agreement, because it's all part of safety. It's just a different kind of safety.
Well, we do ask as part of our safety agreements to, to be kind, respectful, and welcome, to help. To offer help when needed, to ask for help when you also need it.
To keep the makerspace awesome.
Yeah, help keep that. So part of our community agreements are actually in our safety agreement as part of that agreement. And I do refer back to it when, because the kids have signed it. And
I think the challenge can be that often if somebody's coming into the space for the first time, they have like a thing that they want to do right now. And so like, we're going to try to walk them through all of these agreements, but they're not necessarily like really taking it in. Like, this is going to be a thing for us. So
it works better when the teen is like, oh my gosh, this is a new space. This is wonderful. And then they're already open for learning, and we can introduce these agreements as they're there. But if they're really laser focused on a thing, it's hard to reintroduce it. So then we start introducing the thing and how it's done. And then afterwards, I bring in our safety agreements. So I can share our safety agreements with the group.
I actually found it on the community of practice. So
Awesome.
I actually shared it out the other day with our team as we're trying to craft and just kind of what's out there. So yeah, thank you. It's really awesome.
But on top of that, we also have a separate group of health agreements too. And that helped work out with our whole system. I'm gonna let Martin talk about that.
I'm sorry, Desiree, I didn't hear what you just said.
Our noise agreements that we have.
Oh, okay. So we also have an agreement where instead of, and this might actually be a restorative justice practice, is usually for voice volume, we exclude for the day. But within the space of the makerspace and gaming club, we instead we offer a 15-minute break outside the branch, and then they're able to come back in, and we use it kind of a reset. And then if they repeat the behavior, then it's a day exclusion rather than going straight into an exclusion. We kind of have that leeway.
Yeah, I love that idea of the 15-minute break. And I want to call attention to Jovan's question. How do we enforce a community agreement in a no registration drop-in program? So that's what we have here at Pima County. Like, we can't really ask people to sign things so much, or that's what my supervisors have told me. So that does make it trickier, I think. I guess my perspective on it is trying to build relationships before there's a problem, and being very intentional about having like the desk staffed and welcoming people in and trying to learn names, and if there's a smaller problem, speaking up soon so that starts to be understood. And we have our community agreements posted as well, but I know that people don't, or it's not necessarily that people are reading it, so it does have to be more of like a verbal conversation about it. Does anyone else have experience with a drop-in program or questions about that?
No, but I do have a comment about community agreements. I went through a restorative justice training not too long ago, and they mentioned agreements, especially with talking circles. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with talking circles or practice it in your library, but they said that with it really helps if youth feel ownership of the agreement, and then they self-police themselves if they actually feel like, and in order to get that and establish it, you have to revisit it frequently and make sure that the agreements are still valid and that they still feel true to it, and that allows them to have more ownership of it. So that might be something.
Yeah, so maybe bring like just starting the conversation, like, hey, these are our agreements. What do you think of them? Do they resonate with you? Do they cover everything that we need to cover? Is there anything you'd like to add? What does it look like in practice? Those kind of questions. Also, in youth are reminding. These are great points. One question I was curious about is like where your institution lies on the spectrum. So maybe this could be our final question because we're going to be done pretty soon. But like, do you feel like you could just type? I would like everyone to type in where you feel like you lie. Like starting out, very punitive, very like just like what level you're at or what place you're at on the continuum. So I'll start. And as I'm typing, I'm realizing how siloed it can be too. So you might know what your branch is doing or your area, but not know what other places are doing. More punitive than restorative. Okay. Cool. Pittsburgh Public Schools restorative practices. In the absence of true restorative practice, but trying to avoid punitive, yeah. It's really good to have something to replace it with, not just get rid of the code of conduct, but replace it with something else more positive.
Right. And I think that's like kind of one of the big challenges too, is like, you have all this like theory and stuff, but then it's like, oh, what do we actually, what are the mechanics of it? How do we actually engage and like implement it? So yeah, kind of coming up with like those like tools to put in your toolbox is a big, big undertaking.
Yeah. And I see it restorative in our teen space, but not in the rest of the library. So that's something that's happening is a lot. That age difference, it could be applied all the way through adults, but I know that here our board is just focused on youth, but that's something that I think some people would like, is to have it be restorative across the board. Loveland, it's the same for us here at Rockwood. We are punitive, but rarely do we need, yeah. Oh, so Desiree asked, do you think you would get greater staff buy-in if you had a number or examples of success?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that always helps. Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of research to draw on, especially like from the brain development angle, like tons of like legitimate like science that you can point to and say like like these kids are really just being kids, and that kind of thing. And you can use our program as an example. Like we had like a 75% reduction in suspensions. That's like a pretty convincing number for like a lot of people in our system. So that may be beneficial.
Yeah, reading through all these, it seems like everyone is, I think the numbers would really help, and everyone, it seems like, is working in your own to see that we're all kind of on the same trajectory with it, but also, of course, things take time in an institution, and there's so many factors and like idiosyncrasies everywhere. So if you're not fully restorative, that is totally understandable. Oh yeah, could you use
people playing like fakes, and we're not gonna I think that's a good like opportunity to like educate somebody on like what your library's mission is, and say like, well, I get that that's the your expectation, but this is what our mission is, and this is how we serve our community. So bring it back to serving community type stuff is always helpful.
Yeah, the library is for everyone.
Another good line is like, would you rather them just be out on the streets? Always use like, oh, the streets, right? You want to be like out like selling drugs or whatever, So a lot of times like that's a pretty like effective. They'll think twice about that. It's like, well, yeah, maybe I don't. Maybe this is a good place for these kids to be, even if they're just like playing Fortnite or whatever. And it's like about finding the balance, right, between everybody being respectful of each other.
I just want to really quickly say I had the opportunity to participate in a restorative forum at one of our high schools, and a really powerful model was the youth sharing their experiences of how they benefit a larger group, and then the youth got to correct them if they got anything wrong. It was so cool. It was just super like youth voice actually in action. So I just wanted to share that as like something that might be great to try.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so it is 11:01, so if you have to go, totally understandable. Life resources, that webinar is a great resource too, but we can post the documents and stuff that we have and just start more of a thread. I would love to see everyone chime in on that thread about ideas that you have or questions that you have. We can just get that started in the next day or so, really. Is anyone going to be at the Connected Learning Summit? This is not related, but yeah. Okay, the San Francisco, yeah. Thank you guys. So I'll